Do we want to discuss the curse of GM Word of the Week?
You know, I was going to ask you about that after you linked that news story.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like it was, okay, so we did an episode about gremlins, right?
Right.
And you sent me on, I guess it was, what, January 30th?
31st?
31st, so it was yesterday.
Yesterday.
But it was on the 30th that he passed away.
Uh-huh.
That Dick Miller, the actor Dick Miller, passed away.
Right.
Who, among other roles, was known for his role in Gremlins as Murray Futterman, the crazy neighbor who was convinced that gremlins were planted in airplanes by, foreign agents to destroy them from his World War II days. And he has apparently passed away at the age of 90.
Yes.
Which is, I hate to say it, but, I'm glad to finally read about an actor passing away at the age of 90 after an apparently full life, instead of all those depressing stories that come out where it was like, oh, he was young to die and suffered from depression all his life and laughed through it. And it's like, oh, so, obviously I'm sad for the loss of Dick Miller, but I'm glad that he seemed to have lived a long and happy life. Right.
I mean, there's nothing wrong going at 90.
Nope.
As far as I'm aware.
No, and it sounds like he was surrounded by lifelong friends and family members.
Cool.
So that's great.
Yeah. But how is it that we have managed to time our mentioning of him in such a way that it now appears there's a curse?
Yeah, well, this was the thing. After I read the story, I was going to ask you because I seem to have a memory of that happening at least once before.
Uh-huh.
Was there another actor that we mentioned and then killed?
There. Well, now wait a minute here.
Okay. Was there another actor we mentioned who immediately following our mention passed away?
I think there might be, but I cannot now remember who it was.
I seem to remember there was. If anybody out there listens to Word, I guess this is our listener question for the week.
Yeah.
Any of the actors we've mentioned, did they kick the bucket shortly after we mentioned them? Just curious. Yeah. Now I kind of feel bad, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because that episode ended up with a lot of cut content.
Oh,
and one of the things that I wanted to include was Dick Miller's career.
Well, now you can.
He had been around a long time. 90
years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had been an actor for a long time. He had gotten started in the 50s. He worked a lot with some pretty high profile directors like he got started under Roger Corman.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked with James Cameron and others. And it was really, Gremlins was one of his more unique roles because the role was more extensive.
Huh.
He had kind of fallen into playing he was the neighbor.
Sure.
In a lot of stuff, or he was like the guy who just had like two screen per, he would appear on screen for 5 minutes and he would have one line in a lot of things. He was, hey, it's that guy in so many things. But in Gremlins, and then in Gremlins 2, he had very extensive roles.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I did want to talk a little bit about his history as an actor. Because it was interesting. And then I cut it. I'm like, I don't have time for this. But he'll be around forever. I'm sure I'll get to discuss it again someday.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
Well, now you have the opportunity for a tribute episode. But GM Word of the Week, the Dick Miller tribute.
Did you ever see the movie My Blue Heaven?
Steve Martin?
Steve Martin.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I know a bit about it. Witness Protection Program.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's one of the. So when My Blue Heaven? When was it?
That's with
1990.
What's his name?
Rick Moranis.
Rick Moranis, yeah, there you go.
And Joan Cusack.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So, came out in 1990. I had very fond memories of this film. Because obviously, I was a young little thing when I saw it. Not young, but I guess, no, because I saw it on video or something. So, I must have seen it in like junior high or high school. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I watched, it was one of those movies that, you know how as a, when you're young, there's some movies you just watch over and over until the VHS tape is worn out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was one of those movies for me.
Oh, okay.
And then I completely forgot about it because it's actually kind of a forgettable movie.
Sure.
A few months ago, Tiny and I were talking about something. And I don't even know what we were talking about, but I suddenly remembered the movie. And I was telling her about it and had everything wrong about it. And finally convinced her to sit and watch it with me. And one of the things I had forgotten was, like, I thought it was one of those actors who plays Italian gangsters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought it was like Joe Pesci or something in it. In my memory, it was Joe Pesci.
Okay.
Right? Or someone like that. So the movie starts off and I see Steve Martin. And I'm like, oh, who is Steve Martin in this? I don't remember him. It goes on. So the movie is, I guess I should mention the movie. Steve Martin plays a gangster who enters the witness protection program and agrees to testify against his former boss. And so the U.S. Marshal Rick Moranis, I guess, no, Rick Moranis was technically part of the FBI. He was not a U.S. Marshal. So anyway, he brings Steve Martin to this little, like, suburban town in the middle of nowhere. Basically it's hell for him because he's a New York gangster and he's used to the New York life. His wife leaves him. He goes back into crime immediately on getting there. And then he discovers that the FBI has just been dumping all of their witnesses in this one town. So he meets a whole bunch of former gangsters who he thought was dead. And they team up and start a crime wave. And among them is Dick Miller. He like owns the pet shop there.
Awesome.
And he was a former gangster. So we watched this. So I got Tiny to watch the movie with me just like 2 weeks ago. And it was a very entertaining movie. It was a very, do you know that particular period of movies where the 80s were trying to die and the 90s wouldn't let them? Like right, the 80s was on life support. It was exactly one of those movies. It was very, very 80s and trying not to be. But man, it was funny. And it reminded me that Joan Cusack, I gotta say, I think she's a terrible actress. I think she's just awful. She is so, like, not...
There are very few things I've seen her in that I've enjoyed her in.
Right? I feel so bad saying that, too, but...
Yeah. She's just about entertaining enough to play opposite her brother.
Yeah. She's entertaining, but not because she's a good actress.
No.
But then it reminded me of, did you ever see Toys?
Toys. That's the Richard Pryor one, right?
Robin Williams.
Oh, that's the Robin Williams. Richard Pryor is in the other, what's the other toy thing?
Richard Pryor was in The Toy.
Oh, The Toy. There you go. Okay.
Where he basically becomes... Wow. I was just about to explain the plot. Then I realized that in this day and age, the plot is a bit insensitive, shall we say.
It is.
Because essentially, a rich man pays Richard Pryor to basically be his rich, spoiled son's toy.
Mm-hmm. and many lessons are thereby learned.
Yes. But wow, that is an awkward. He buys Richard Pryor and gives him to his kid to play with. Oh, this is awkward to explain.
That's right.
I have to tell this joke, this off joke.
Okay.
All
right.
Let's run the subject. Are you familiar with the Pikmin franchise?
Yes.
So my young cousin, he was young at the time, he was describing the Pikmin game to me. And it was one of those innocent things where he didn't know any better. And so, oh, you're playing Pikmin. What's it about? Because I had never played it. And he says, oh, it's a fun game on the GameCube. It's this game where you get these colored people to do what you say. And I'm like, oh, we need to rephrase that.
Yeah, let's talk about a new way to discuss that game. Wow.
From the mouths of kids. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So no toys, though. Robin Williams. It's basically Robin Williams as sort of a Willy Wonka type figure. He owns a toy factory, and he is supposed to be like this whimsical child at heart who is running the toy factory. But it actually just comes off as kind of creepy and weird. Mm-hmm. And like the movie utterly fails to land in any way. Okay, like it just doesn't work. It's a complete train wreck.
Right.
And it's got Robin Williams, it's got Michael Gambon, it's got Joan Cusack, it's got LL Cool J as Michael Gambone's son.
Right.
And Jamie Foxx, Robin Wright, directed by Barry Levinson.
What you're saying is it's got a lot of people in it who should have known better.
Right. It should, and it was heavily marketed. Like there was a lot of money poured into this movie. It was heavily marketed because of the cast. It was supposed to be this whimsical, fun family comedy, like basically Robin Williams' evil uncle, who is an ex-military guy who was drummed out of the American military because, despite being American, he had a British accent, and so he was accused of being a spy. This is like Michael Gambon. The plot point is Michael Gambone's British accent, for no reason, got him kicked out of the military. Mm-hmm. And then his son, so he took his son, LL Cool J, and trained him to be like a special forces operative. So LL Cool J spends the whole movie sneaking around like in camouflage and being invisible, and like he's always on the job.
Wasn't he in bright pink camouflage at one point?
Yes, that was a thing. And the whole thing was supposed to be like this whimsical story of how Willy Wonka takes back his toy factory from the evil military.
Sure.
Because they're making military toys, which is bad. And like the whimsy and charm of the movie utterly failed. It didn't make, like, it made back half its budget. I think it was what was it? It must have been, I gotta look now. I think it was $50 million to make 1992. That's
not an inconsequential sum of money.
No. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $91 million. So just shy of $100 million. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it made back about half that. It made about $20 million back.
I remember watching it on video at some point and going, why is Robin Williams in this film? What is this film actually being made?
But the funny thing was, it was like Barry Levinson was at his high point. Because it was, he had done Good Morning Vietnam, and he had done, what was the crime drama he did? About, Bugsy. The Bugsy Siegel crime drama, the biopic. Right?
Yeah, okay.
And so he was at a point where, and Robin Williams was, of course, at his high point at that point. So when the two of them teamed up to do this vanity pick that Barry Levinson had had in his drawer since basically forever, right? He had wanted to make, this was his dream movie that he wanted to make. And he finally had reached a point in his career where a studio would say yes to anything he proposed. And so the two of them made this movie, you know. And he had done Rain Man, right? He directed Rain Man in 88.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it was Good Morning Vietnam, Rain Man, and then Bugsy, and he was on top.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, Bugsy, but yeah, Rain Man and Good Morning Vietnam.
Bugsy didn't do great, but it was critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a very well done movie. You know, it was well acted, it was well scripted, but it was a biopic. So, you know, it was not a blockbuster, but it did very well. And it showed it showed his range as a director and as a producer. So anyway, so he was able to get this movie made, and it was just a nightmare, but I heartily recommend watching it.
Really?
Okay. Yes. Oh, yes. You have to watch it.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
It's one of those train wrecks that you can't look away at the point where Robin Williams and I think it was Joan Cusack in this scene. They staged a fake MTV music video as part of an elaborate plot to sneak into the factory. And you're just watching this with the expression that, like, the way a dog looks at a ceiling fan.
Uh-huh.
Just like confused and intrigued. Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you've never seen Toys, you have to watch it. And if you have seen Toys, but you haven't seen it lately, watch it again. And then watch, what's the other one? Hudson Hawk.
Oh, Jesus. What is wrong with you?
I'm a masochist at heart. I hear you're in for some snow, and they've declared a national disaster, or a disaster up there.
Yes, yeah, all emergency. 3 inches of it.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Have you stocked up on canned goods and
I
shotgun?
have not.
I almost said shotgun fuel.
Yeah.
You stocked up on your canned goods and shotgun fuel?
I've got shotgun fuel, yeah. Mine's the leaded shotgun fuel. The more effective
rustlers
kind.
Are in the turnips again. Get me that shotgun and make sure it's all gassed up.
Wow.
Oh, man.
The images in my head.
We had a blizzard here.
Did you? Is that like the thing that has happened?
We had a legit blizzard here on Monday.
Because I thought you had some sort of merry-go-round ride going on up there in the Midwest called the polar vortex.
Yeah, that's what they called it, a polar vortex.
Come ride the polar vortex.
Remember, like, when did it become we had to have all these complicated names and things for all this stuff? And every winter storm had to have a name. Like, I remember, when I was a kid and we would have snowstorms, and then one day they started talking about nor'easters, which was, as I understood it, it was basically the same thing we had just called a snowstorm all along.
Yeah.
But it was, it was affecting the nor'east or the northeast or whatever. It was, the jet stream was blowing to the northeast. And now we have, this snowstorm is caused by a polar vortex, which is different from a nor'easter somehow. And it's like, who cares? It's a blizzard. It's a snowstorm. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm concerned, I need to know if there's going to be snow and if there's going to be wind driving that snow horizontally, which there was. I have to say, for the first time in my life, I saw real snowdrifts.
Ooh.
Like, there were places, like, we got around, it wasn't much. I guess it was around 15 to 18 inches of snow.
Mm-hmm.
But there were places the next day on the lawn outside our complex that were almost bare of snow. And there were hills that had been blown up by the wind that were like 2 feet of snow blocking the door to the building.
Huh. So
it's the first time in my life I've actually seen legit snowdrifts. Well, and then the temperature dropped down to such a level that even in Wisconsin, the people said no. So yesterday, the temperature was -20 and then like -30 with the wind chill. This was supposed to be Tiny's first week at college. They closed everything. Everything was closed for 3 days. The first day for the snow, then 2 more days because the air, if you went outside, the air would cause you physical pain.
Oh, wow. That's fun.
Yep.
That's amazing. Did that have anything to do with why we didn't record a show last week?
No, that's another entirely different story.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was such a weird, that was such a mess.
Yeah, I guess.
So I got up one morning and we were having trouble with financial aid and some other issues with paying for college for Tiny.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to go over to the school and just resolve it. Neither of us had gotten a particularly good night's sleep the night before because of some issues with our neighbors. And there had been a lot going on. So we both woke up sort of grumpy and annoyed. And then this thing with the financial aid had not been resolved yet. And, we had to take care of the money. So ultimately it was, you know what? We're going to go out. We're going to grab something to eat for breakfast. And then we are going to go over to your school and just resolve this. And, I'm going to go in there with you and we're going to punch people if we have to and get it taken care of. So, we go through and have an extremely frustrating, grumpy morning. The breakfast was not good and the service was slow. So, of course, it set us up for badness. And we ultimately did get everything resolved. And I get home and I look at my phone and I've got a text message. And the text message is, hey, everything okay? And it took me a minute to recognize the number because I don't actually put contacts in my phone.
Oh.
So I had to scroll back through previous messages from that number and I'm like, oh, it's Brian. Why is he asking me if I'm okay? Because we don't talk by text message.
No,
unless it's an emergency.
No.
So I'm already worried that I'm getting a text message from you, but I also thought it was weirdly prescient because, it had been such a bad and stressful morning that I'm like, that's so weird. So I'm like, so that's why my response was what it was, which was, why are you asking? because there's sort of this whole, are you spying on me? How do you know? Like I could count on you to, if I post something on social media or in Discord that's like grumpy or surly, and the same with you, I could count on you to ask me, hey, everything cool?
Uh-huh.
But it's like, at that point, I hadn't been posting on anything. So I'm curious, why are you asking? How did you know everything would not be cool? And then you revealed to me, because we're supposed to be recording today. And I'm like, oh, right. It's Friday. And in getting up in a angry state, and dragging Tiny out of the house and basically saying, look, we just have to go fix this thing. Because I'm not leaving it over the weekend and we're not being done with. I totally forgot it was podcast recording day.
Uh-huh.
So I wasn't there when you were.
Right. Which is unusual because usually you're here before I am.
Yeah. Well, that's just a time zone thing.
Yeah.
More than anything. So I told you what had happened. And at that point you said, should we reschedule? I'm like, no, I can jump on. I don't care. Let's just do it. I hadn't prepared any notes or anything, and I didn't know if you had prepared any notes, but I'm like, fine. Sit down, plug in my microphone, we get started, I start talking to you, and then I immediately say, I'll be right back, and cut off the call.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Mysteriously and with little explanation.
Yes, that's because I was fleeing to the bathroom to empty the contents of my stomach. Whereupon I spent the next 48 hours with rather unpleasant food poisoning that affected all aspects of my digestive tract.
Hooray.
Uh-huh. So it was a good weekend.
Yeah.
And that is why there was not an episode last week. Do you have current business to deal with, sir? What do you bring to the table today?
What did I bring to the table today? Well, I ran I think we mentioned this last recording that I was preparing to run.
Yes, I remember you preparing to run Terranoth.
Terranoth. Yeah.
Terranoth.
The Genesys system from FFG, their Terranoth supplement, which is, I guess, their fantasy world.
Right. In the tongue of the Elder Kings, it means Land of Steel.
Sure. Okay. If you say so.
Hey, I'm told by fandom or the Terranoth wiki on fandom.com.
Oh, well, those are always great resources. Anyway, the game, my prep consisted mostly of printing off the pages I needed, and that was really it. Because the game was initially scheduled. I started to set this thing up back in November, right? And I got my players together and I said, players, I would like characters from you by the 1st of December. You know, they had like 3 weeks to do it in. I didn't, whatever.
Right.
Life happens, apparently, and by the end of December, I finally had 3 characters. And so that, because I told him I'm gonna create a game myself that fits those 3 characters, right?
Right.
Because that's how you do things when you're a GM.
Uh-huh.
And that would have been fine had I had all of December to do that in, because there wasn't much going on in December.
Right.
Just Christmas and the break and all that. And that's kind of when I figured on doing all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, since it wasn't until the end of December I got things, I then no longer had any time to prep anything in.
Mm-hmm.
So we coordinated eventually a day we were going to do all this stuff on, and things got, busy with other stuff and all that. So I ended up just running the pre-made adventure for Terranoth that FFG provides. Okay?
Yeah.
And, I read through it, read through it twice. Felt like I had a pretty good grasp on it, but didn't quite realize, because it doesn't say anywhere in the adventure, and there are no pre-made characters to go with their pre-made adventure, unlike their other, a lot of their other role-playing game stuff, like all the Star Wars stuff. The pre-made adventures follow on from the box sets.
Right.
So you just keep using those characters if you want to.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But not so with this Terranoth thing. There were no pre-made characters that went along with it. There are pre-made characters up on the site, but they are not directly associated with that adventure. They came after that adventure had been made. They were not part of that adventure.
Right. I got
you. Okay. So I just ran the adventure as is, and they just created characters according to the book. And it turns out there's about 100 and some odd point difference between starting characters and the adventure as written.
Huh.
Yeah, which was fine for a lot of it. Until the end, when you're up against a mad scientist, a room full of undead, and a vampire. Things were pretty hairy there for a little bit, and I was on the verge, having realized how badly out of whack it was. I was on the verge of bringing in some outside help, just to sort of level the field a bit for him.
Sure.
When they tripped over the victory condition. At that point, because there was this ritual going on that would have meant that the vampire would have been protected against sunlight, and so could walk the earth walk the land during the day, all that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
But once you disrupt the ritual, she has no reason to stick around and takes off.
Yeah, well, of course.
Which immediately lessens the plot load, and allows the PCs to eventually win. But it was a near thing. We were down to, I think we had one actually passed out, and the rest of them were down to like 2 or 3 hit points.
Ooh.
Yeah. it was a little hairy there for a minute. But they got there, and fun was had, even though things were extremely unbalanced. And it's a one-shot anyway, so that's not really terrible.
Right.
Know? It's not like these characters are going to go on to other things, and therefore their stories would have been truncated prematurely.
Mm-hmm.
But, whatever. We got there. We had a good time. Nope, didn't record it. You just have to take my word for it.
Oh. This is how we got onto the whole disastrous topic last time.
Uh-huh.
Was you not recording it and me telling you that was okay.
Yep. Which, to be fair, I knew it was okay because I wasn't doing it, so. But you also ran a game?
Well, that was, yeah, so, I have to laugh because, I don't know if you remember back in December when you were getting ready to run Terranoth.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that I was going to run a one-shot, a sci-fi based Savage Worlds one-shot for a group of friends online.
Okay.
This Thursday, the 7th of February, will be the completion of that one-shot.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Math me up some math here. How many sessions does a one-shot typically take?
Well, it could take any number of sessions. Actually.
Oh, okay. All right.
One shot refers to a self-contained single adventure, but a one shot can take several sessions. And originally, it was planned to take 2 sessions. It was basically a 2-part adventure.
Okay.
It has stretched out to 3 parts, one of which was actually played on time in December.
Mm-hmm.
One was played 2 weeks ago in January, and one which will be played next week.
Right.
Whereas originally it was supposed to be played over 2 weeks in December, before Christmas. Because I just wanted to have a nice fun game with a couple of friends before Christmas.
Sure.
So, and you know what? I can't even blame their character generation because it had pre-generated characters. I made the characters. Yeah.
Nobody's fault but your own, huh?
Yep. Yeah, it's been fun. I can't say that it hasn't been. Savage Worlds is a fun little system. I very much enjoy it. So, how is your new career as a graphic artist and layout designer?
I've discovered that what I'm doing is called editorial design, and I'm happy with that.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, editorial design.
Editorial design. That is so good to know. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. What that means is I have been laying out Transit, doing layout work on Transit, getting it ready for publication. It's been a process. It's been a week, I think. Has it been a week? Something like a week.
That you've been working on it? Or since we spoke about it?
A week that I've been working on it, layout-wise. Because I put out some feelers, and I need to email your man back and let him know that we're going a different route. But I put out some feelers for how much that was going to cost to have done.
Mm-hmm.
That's a substantial amount of money that I do not have laying around.
Yeah, laying out. I see. When I made the suggestion for the gentleman that helped me do the electronic stuff, I knew that the price that he had given me was price for like a simple book.
Right.
And once you get to an RPG product and you're going to have an index, that was one of the things he asked me about when he was pricing my project was, do I have to do an index? Apparently indexes are something people don't like doing.
Yeah, fair enough. He asked me the same question.
Yeah.
Back matter indexes, that kind of stuff. Appendixes,
right.
et cetera, et cetera.
So I think that adds a substantial amount of work.
Well, because it turns out in order to do an index, at least in InDesign, in order to do an index, you actually have to read the book.
Well, I would think if you're going to do an index for anything, you have to read the book, don't you?
Yeah, but reading the book takes time.
Well, yeah.
You can't just look at a block of text and make it the right shape. You actually have to read the book and pick out the keywords and figure out, which it's fine. Anyway, the point being, the number I received was a number that was not within my reach without doing some sort of crowdfunding.
Oh, and crowdfunding is so much fun.
But it seems silly to me to do crowdfunding just to do a thing I could eventually learn to do. Mm-hmm. Given, typical crowdfunding campaign runs about 30 days, right?
Yep. Given
30 days, would I rather spend the money and at the end of 30 days, would I rather start a crowdfunding thing just to fund the thing 30 days later, or spend the 30 days learning how to do it myself?
Or, as an alternative, remember the angry plan is spend the 30 days running the Kickstarter to raise the money to do the things you don't know how to do, and then end up forced to teach yourself how to do the things that you didn't know how to do because the people you hired to do them didn't do them right.
Right.
So, best of both worlds there.
Exactly. Now, I'm confident your man would have been fine. He's got the credentials. He's got the experience. That's fine.
Yeah. No, he did. This is not the layout artist that I originally hired to do the print layout of the book when there were some issues there. Mm-hmm. This was a layout artist I brought in to turn the print layout into the electronic formats of the book.
Right.
To replace the layout artist who had run off to China.
I'm gonna love that as a future reference. And then my layout artist ran off to China because it sounds like he did it deliberately. He deliberately abandoned you midstream.
Well, I am hard to work with. I'll admit that. Still.
Are you run off to China hard to work with?
A fascist regime on another continent to escape me. That's a little overstatement,
Yeah.
Especially because he's not the first person who's run off to a tyrannical country to escape me.
Yeah, well. Am I in Australia?
Speaking of tyrannical countries, wow.
Yeah. So
apologies to all our Australian listeners.
Yes, both of you. I'm very sorry. So that was the decision: was do I go to the effort of doing the I mean, and it's not just plug all the things in. No, I would have to learn how to do Kickstarter and then do the campaign and then get the thing with the money and then move the money. It's not just do Kickstarter, make money, have layout. So
yeah, there's actually more steps involved. I can say that.
It's weird. It's so weird. So I decided that no, it actually made more sense for me to go ahead and learn how to do the layout. Even if it took 30 days, at the end of 30 days, I'd have 30 days worth of experience doing layout. Which I know doesn't sound like a lot, but that's because you at home sitting there, you think you're going to squeeze learning layout into at most an hour or 2 hours at the end of your day after having worked and all. No, I don't have a job.
No.
I have literally all day to learn how to do layout.
Your full-time job for the last week was learning layout.
That's right.
And yeah, there's just enough with working with the software and with just general principles and stuff that it actually does take some time to learn. It's not something that you just sort of, I'll just watch a YouTube video and then, I'm good.
Right. Well, here's my process. We'll get to the actual information about the transit stuff, but here's my process for learning to work with InDesign. Mm-hmm. Start out knowing nothing.
This episode's sponsored by Adobe.
Because I find that knowing nothing is often the best way to start something.
Mm-hmm.
Open the program, figure out how to dump the text in, and then from that point on, you are doing layout. And every time you get stuck or want to do a thing you don't know how to do, or can't find the thing to make it do it, even though you know the program can do it, you search for that specific thing in your search engine of choice or on YouTube or whatever. And you learn that thing. You watch the video or you read the article or whatever. You learn that thing. Now you will never forget how to do that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you keep going until you hit the next point at which you get stuck. And repeat. And eventually, what happens 232 pages later is you have completed a layout.
Right.
Now go back and start over.
Mm-hmm.
With everything you know. And tidy and clean it up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a good process. The one thing I'll say is I actually ended up relying a lot less on the search engine and actually just going right to the official documentation.
Right.
Both online and in the program.
Right.
Because I find that that's where you're going to get the best answers.
Yeah, sometimes I find, at least with my learning style, I need to be shown something, how to do a particular thing specifically, just so I can emulate it, Like there's, learning styles. There's a difference between watching something being done and reading about something being done. And sometimes I find that watching something being done is easier than reading.
Yeah, see, I learn better. I actually learn just by either verbal or written instruction. Mm-hmm. And then I go and do the thing myself.
Right.
From just the instructions. And then if I have to, I refer back to the instructions. But I just sort of read and synthesize the instructions. Then I do the thing. And then if I run into trouble, I go back to the instructions. I don't learn as well watching people do things. It just doesn't stick in my brain the right way.
Right.
But that's just learning styles, as you say.
That's all of us being different. Isn't that neat?
Yeah. We're all wonderful snowflakes.
That's right. So I've done all that. My layout is, aside from connecting up internal references like, see page, blah, 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 for more information about X. Aside from connecting those up, I'm ready for art. My layout is essentially done.
It actually looks really nice.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
It was no small feat to get it to there, but I got it there. And so I could, theoretically, if I wanted no art at all, I could publish the PDF today.
Mm-hmm.
But I want some art. I want at least a little bit of art in there to kind of
jazz it up
a little, or at least
punch it up,
give some idea of what's going on. But what it amounts,
break up the text.
Yeah, break up the text more than anything else. And I have contacted and will be retaining the services of an artist because I am not going to learn how to art in a week.
No,
that's not going to happen. I am aware of that. But I'll tell you who I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
Getting a guy named John Ariosa. John Ariosa, for those of you who have no idea who he is, it's fine. I am about to tell you. Please relax. He is an artist who has worked in games before. Tabletop games and role-playing games and whatnot before. Mm-hmm. And he's worked for Fantasy Flight Games and done some of their Star Wars stuff. So I know he's got the sci-fi thing going on. He can handle that kind of stuff. And it's fairly simple art. It's just going to be black and white line art.
Summoner Wars, Dungeon Run, the BioShock Infinite board game or card game, is that?
Yep.
Jeez.
Board game. Mice and Mystics he's done.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I pulled him up since you mentioned his name just out of curiosity.
Yep.
Ooh, vehicle design for Battleship, Transformers, Marvel, and unannounced IPs.
Yeah.
Oh, because it looks like he does a lot of concept art.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's where we're at. I could throw some art in it, throw a cover on it. Into February.
Mm-hmm.
This could be out for purchase and printing. And gosh, what a relief it'll be.
Yeah, right? So I'm sorry. I just got a little distracted because in looking up John Arioso, I ended up on his LinkedIn page, which logged me into LinkedIn, which I have not used in 3 years.
Nobody uses LinkedIn, but go ahead.
Well, I have been offered numerous jobs.
Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and several people have wished me happy birthday.
That's nice.
Who are these? Oh, I know who some of these people are. Oh man, some of my former accounting clients are following me on LinkedIn. They must think I'm dead. Oh. All right, so sorry, I did not mean to get distracted like that. Yeah, but the project relief thing is something I know. The relief at the end of the project.
Yeah.
Because technically it's Tuesday, February 5th. I could say the Angry GM book Kickstarter will officially be over.
Oh, well. How nice.
It was supposed to be over this week. It was supposed to be over last week, but it's been extended another week. So at this point, all the physical books have been mailed to everybody, and people are getting them and they like them. And the electronic books, we listed them on DriveThru, or we submitted them to DriveThru RPG. They got approved. And then we were going to send out coupon codes to all the backers so that they could have their electronic copies. And then at the same time, we would start selling the electronic copies, and we would start selling the physical copies so people could buy a copy.
Right. Makes sense.
Right. Well, DriveThru RPG decided to do a server migration.
Right.
And broke their system for a week.
Oh, that's not good.
They were offline for about 4 days, starting on Monday the 25th? 28th.
Not good.
Monday the 28th. So we couldn't start selling the books. So I ended up just taking the electronic copies, putting them in a zip file, putting them in OneDrive, and just sending a download link out to everybody. I'm like, here, you download them here. I'll send you a coupon code once DriveThru RPG is fixed. Because I'm tired of... I had a call with Jim at Third Act Publishing, and he says, I can't help but notice that your project just seems to be the one project where literally everything goes wrong. I'm like, yeah, this is working with Angry Games.
Hey, thanks for noticing, Jim.
Because the thing is, he's not wrong.
No. That's the worst part.
But at least the project is still it's still being done in less than a year.
Yes. That's
start to
always
finish,
good.
it took less than a year.
Unlike I finally, speaking of Kickstarter projects that take frickin' forever, I finally got my copy of the John Carter of Mars RPG.
Did you?
From Modifius. I had to partake in the Kickstarter to get it, but I got it. It's interesting. They've laid it out sideways. So take your 8.5 by 11, piece of paper, turn it on its side. And that is the layout for the book. Not the 3/4 size like they did for the Star Wars Saga edition from WotC. But no, full page sideways. Bound at what you would normally consider the top of the page. It is not now the top of the page. I don't know how I feel about this. I mean, I don't mind a little experimentation with the format and whatnot. That's fine.
Right.
Not a complaint there, but I will tell you that makes those pages very long, very heavy, very floppy, and they feel, for the amount they're being expected to support, they feel kind of thin.
Really?
Yeah, like they might tear at any moment if slightly mishandled. And I'm not really super duper thrilled about that.
Huh. because I just ended up with two of Modiphius's games. I ended up with Star Trek and Conan by accident.
Right. Not on purpose. You didn't ask for them.
Well, I'm curious because you and I had talked a little bit about Modiphius's core mechanic.
Right.
And I've been like exploring different core mechanics in games out of curiosity.
Uh-huh.
So I mentioned a little bit before Christmas, just in passing to Tiny, I'd really like to check out one of Modiphius's games, either Star Trek or Conan, you know? And so when people started asking her for ideas for Christmas presents for me,
right,
she mentioned both of them, and I ended up with both. Which is not a bad thing.
No.
You know, but I don't think I'm going to read all of both of them. But the books are pretty nice. They're nice quality. I was very impressed by them. I really like the Star Trek book. It looks really good.
Cool.
You know, and so I'm surprised that their quality has dropped off.
Well, I don't know that it has dropped off. I just know that this particular format makes it seem like the pages are really thin and really flimsy.
Well, maybe.
But I don't, it's okay, I guess, if you're careful with it.
Yeah, it just like something like that. I would think they were actually using a different weight of paper or something, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. It just feels odd. That's just me, probably.
Tiny and I try to have a movie night once a week.
Right.
You know, Sunday nights, we make sure we've got nothing else going on so that we can just do takeout and a movie and just kind of relax and get ready for the next week.
Sure.
And so a few weeks ago, I convinced her, because we go back and forth picking out movies, and I wanted to watch the original Star Wars trilogy.
Okay.
Which I had not seen in a while. I had not seen it in many years. And she has not seen since she was a child.
Oh, wow.
And was shown it and has no memory of the original trilogy. She's in the generation that grew up with the prequels. Yeah, I felt so she was really seeing them for the first time because,
sure.
she was too young to really know what was going on, had no memory of them. And she really enjoyed them. But then, of course, they're fantastic movies. Mm-hmm. They're great. So she decided, though, that, we've watched a couple other movies since then, but she decided she wants to watch the prequels because those were her Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the problem.
They don't exist?
Prequel movies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as us, the old fogies who grew up with the original movies, we know what the prequels are and what they represent. And, we've all watched all the analysis. Yeah, we've all watched the Mr. Plinkett video at this point.
Right.
And we can recite at heart every narrative and tonal mistake George Lucas made. Through all of those movies and everything that was wrong with the characters and how terrible the romance was and all of that stuff, right?
Right.
So last night we watched The Phantom Menace. And I was trying to be good. Partly because she wanted to watch the movie and she doesn't need me sitting there crapping on the movie the whole time.
Right.
Right? She wants to enjoy the movie, so fair enough. But here's the other thing. What was it? When did Phantom Menace come out?
Oh, gosh. You don't really want me to tell you that, do you?
99, right?
Yeah, which means it is...
I know.
20 years old.
I know, sir. I know. It was 20 years ago. Okay? I'm past that point now where every time I find out how old something is that...
Okay.
It is a little upsetting for the one that was Star Wars come lately. The one I didn't grow up with is now 20 years old. Because that just makes the other one even older.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about The Phantom Menace. When it came out, I actually went and saw it opening night. And I saw it 5 further times.
Oh, no. See, we lined up for that bad boy the night before, and we were there all day, and we saw it once and came out of the theater and went, never again.
Well, this is the funny thing. So I sat and watched the movie last night. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have all of the failings it has, because it does.
Oh, don't do this to me. Don't suddenly alienate yourself from me forever.
It wasn't that bad.
Oh, you liar.
A lot of maybe I'm just softening in my old age, or maybe we have reached a point now where Disney has done such a terrible job that I'm willing to look at these ones as the okay ones. It's like, wow, Lucas wasn't the worst thing to happen to Star Wars. We just needed Rian Johnson to come along and convince us how good we used to have it.
Here's what I will say about the Phantom Menace, okay? Mm-hmm. The Phantom Menace is an awesome Star Wars movie.
Yes.
For the first 15 minutes. And I swear to God, it immediately goes downhill as soon as Jar Jar appears on screen.
See, I didn't even find Jar Jar that bad.
You could hear the entire theater go, oh.
But you could ignore him. Like, that was I found C-3PO obnoxious through much of the movie.
Through the Phantom Menace?
All he did was whine and complain and tell them that they were going to fail.
Yeah.
Right? I found the Ewoks, ridiculous and comical. Okay, that I did not care for the Ewoks.
I don't have a problem with the Ewoks.
See, I found it was just too much. It was a little bit too cutesy and silly. Like tonally speaking, it just was a little bit too wacky. Okay, but I'm not saying that they were bad. I'm just saying that, C-3PO grated on me and the Ewoks annoyed me, and Jar Jar Binks is in that class for me, at least in the first one. Now, we haven't watched the remaining two yet, so I don't know what is going to happen. But there were some very good high points in Phantom Menace, too. I actually very much enjoyed the pod racing scene. I had forgotten how well done and how exciting the race was. Mm-hmm. It was a really cool scene. And there was a level of attention to detail in it that I don't think I ever noticed. Of when Anakin's one engine catches fire and he closes the vents to starve the fire of air so it goes out. And then because his fuel is burned off, he transfers the fuel between the two engines. And you could see him doing these things and the display on screen. And it's like, if you know a little bit, you could say, oh yeah, that's what he's doing. That's they thought a little bit about it. And and of course the race itself was exciting. It was pretty well. There were some editing mistakes but even the end battle, ignoring the Gungan part.
Oops, we won.
Well, okay, but I don't find the Gungans any sillier than the Ewoks again. It's sticks and rocks versus stormtroopers.
It's not so much the Gungans. I can kind of live with that because it's the Gungans. It's that's fine. I'm talking about the whole mess with Anakin in the starfighter going into the ship and
crashing inside the ship and then accidentally launching his engines into the reactor. Yes, okay, fair enough. That was, but you know what? That was a Harry Potter victory.
Oh.
Okay, that was a 10-year-old wish fulfillment victory. And I'm not one of these people who says, but we have to remember the Star Wars movies is for kids, because I know that there is a difference between a movie for kids and a movie that is good for the whole family. Uh-huh. And Star Wars is or at least the prequels were more, the first one, they were attempting to be more for the family.
Yeah, no kid is going to go watch a movie about tax problems.
Right. No, I understand that. And so Anakin did the Harry Potter thing. I can even ignore that. As much as I complain about them turning the Jedi into space ninjas, like magical space ninjas.
Yeah.
I do have to admit that seeing Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan fighting Darth Maul, that was a really great scene. And most interestingly of all, there was some interesting dialogue between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan Jinn that made me want to know more about the two of them.
Okay. Well, there's a whole line of comics and books for you to do that with.
Is there really?
Oh, yeah.
I'm very curious about how they, like, there is an implication that Qui-Gon Jinn was a maverick. Mm-hmm. Right? That he was constantly...
Yeah, the thinking now is he's some sort of gray Jedi. Yeah.
And that Obi-Wan was conflicted between genuine affection for Qui-Gon and also knowing he wasn't the best teacher. Mm-hmm. And if the second and the third movies had been smarter about it, Obi-Wan's failings as a Jedi could have been him picking up too much from Qui-Gon. Mm-hmm. Because that's even touched on at the end of the movie where Yoda kind of snarks at Obi-Wan and says, you're getting to be just like your teacher. You're getting a little bit too defiant, and that's not going to do you well. And then he ended up saddled with training Anakin, even though he knew it was a bad idea, solely because Qui-Gon asked him to do it on his deathbed. Uh-huh. And there is a very interesting conflict in Obi-Wan between his affection for Qui-Gon and knowing that Qui-Gon isn't a good Jedi. That he's a good man, but he's not a good Jedi. And I would have loved to see more of that story, And then they killed Qui-Gon off. But at the same time, now here's the thing. I'm also the first person to say they never should have made the prequel movies because we knew enough about Darth Vader and Anakin. We knew exactly what we needed to know about Luke's father for that story to have meaning, and it left it open for us to imagine the betrayal that Obi-Wan felt, because of the way Obi-Wan talked about Anakin.
Right.
And that he was a good friend and a great pilot, and he had all of this respect for him to the point where, he didn't even want to say he had fallen to the dark side. Right. I know that whole, like, from a certain perspective, what I told you was true thing was all, we didn't think you were ready for the truth. Mm-hmm. But I think Obi-Wan was lying when he said that. I think the real reason was
I think
his respect and love for Anakin was so much that he could not consider Anakin to be Darth Vader.
You're creating, sir, a reason for a plot hole that does not exist.
No, I understand. I understand, and I know a lot of hay has been made about that. But what I'm saying is, before the prequels came along, we could think about that and be like, maybe Obi-Wan said it not because, maybe that was the excuse because he really couldn't bring himself to admit that his good friend had betrayed him. Right? Maybe the betrayal was so serious that it was just a little bit of Obi-Wan, like, it'll never matter. Luke will never find out the whole truth anyway. So I'm just not even going to sully the memory of the man who was my student and my great friend, And we could imagine that and come up with all these different reasons and talk about his motives as a character until the moment they went and made movies that just showed us what happened. So I am the first person to say, no, don't do prequels. Leave the backstory, and leave it unsaid so that we as the audience have interesting things to think about and discuss and wonder about. Because that's great. But at the same time, I'm also sitting here saying, I'd really like to know more about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. I would like to see some of their adventures. They were an interesting pair of characters. Anyway, my point is, the Phantom Menace was not giving it a fair watching, a fair neutral watching. with the distance of time behind me now, was not as bad as I remembered it. And there were some genuinely good parts. There were some groaner parts. There were some, I'm still going to say midi-chlorians was a terrible idea. And that I had my head in my hands when I knew it was, I heard Yoda talking about midi-chlorians. I was wondering, Qui-Gon, what are midi-chlorians? Can't the Force just be magic that anyone can have? Because the minute you make a blood test for it, now it's a chosen one thing. Right, and that bothers me too. Because I still resent the whole loss of the everyman character. The idea that anyone could be a hero, all you have to do is go through hell and survive.
Feedback from Volcronus. You remember him?
I do.
We haven't heard from him in a little while. It's nice to have you back, Volcronus. Commenting on episode 61. What's your favorite memory related to RPGs?
Oh, this sounds like something you picked to answer.
This might be something I picked to answer. Maybe I want to hear what your favorite memory related to RPGs is.
Let's talk about our feelings and happiness. Let's not make the RPG community mad at us. All right. So do you have a favorite memory related to RPGs, sir?
No, that's not for you. Can't turn. I already turned it on you. You can't turn it right back around on me.
Yeah, but it's just a hard question.
Hard question.
Well, you know what? Can I get sappy here?
Sure.
Like, role-playing gaming has been a big part of my life for a long time. Mm-hmm. It is the primary thing that I do with my friends. It is my primary social outlet. And it has been almost all of my life. It's not the only social thing I do, but it's the social thing that I have done with the closest friends I've had.
Right.
And so many of my warmest memories in life come from role-playing games. And as such, it's really hard to pick one. You know? I guess, okay. So, honestly, I think my favorite memory, the one that I am always going to keep with me, is one that looks a lot different knowing what I know now than it did at the time. My father, I've mentioned before, he played a lot of like the Avalon Hill war games.
Right.
And he would always, in the basement, he had a big workbench where he would, do all sorts of stuff. But one of the things he would do was he would set up one of the board games and, he would be playing out both sides of the game because, he didn't have anyone to play with after, his friends had all become adults. They all had families. And so he would have some like the blue versus the gray type Avalon Hill war game, like Gettysburg or something. And he would be playing out both sides, and he would have the game set up for weeks and weeks and weeks. And once I hit about 10 years old or so, 9 or 10 years old, I started to be curious about it and ask him about it. And so he was willing to start teaching me to play these games. And we played a couple of them. One of my favorites was Starship Troopers, which was a war game based on the Heinlein book. Mm-hmm. It was very neat. If you ever have a chance to try Starship Troopers, which I can't imagine is easy, I would love to get a copy of it. I'm trying to think who did this. Yeah, it came out in 1976. And I can't even see the company that published it. Can't find it. It doesn't matter. Okay. Anyway, that was one of my favorites. It was asynchronous play. So one player would play the human space marines and the other player would play the aliens, which included both the skinnies, who were a humanoid race from the book that had been under the rule of the arachnids, who were the big space bugs. And one of the neat things was if you played as the arachnids, you got a piece of hex paper that had the board on it, and you got to plan out in secret where your arachnid hives and tunnels had been dug. So that as the Terrans would have to drop onto the planet and then look for your tunnels and blast them open and then, try to kill you. And you would burst out of the tunnels and drag them down underground and kill them. And I realize I'm getting very distracted from my favorite memory now. So yada, yada, yada. He taught me all these war games. War games weren't really my jam. They were fun, and it was fun to play with my dad and all of that stuff. But I eventually got this board game called Hero Quest, which was like D&D light. And it was partly because I had started to get interest in D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. My cousin had left me some books. But I got a hold of this game, Hero Quest. This was in 89 or 88, somewhere around there. And basically, it was also asynchronous play. One player was basically the dungeon master, and the other player would play the role of the four heroes. The barbarian, the elf, the fighter, and the wizard. And there were all sorts of different scenarios on a generic map or whatever. So I started running my dad through all the scenarios in the book, and he went along with it, even though it was not his jam at all. He went along with it. And then I started designing my own scenarios once we had run through all the ones in the book. And I started overcomplicating the rules and making a general mess of things. And my dad went along with all of it. And it was only years later when we were talking about it. And I just happened to bring up, oh man, I remember Hero Quest. Do you remember Hero Quest? And my dad looks at me and says, yeah, I hated that game.
Thanks, Dad.
He's not into role-playing games. He was never going to be into role-playing games. They were not his jam. And I was making a gigantic mess of the game because I kept adding more and more complexity and deadly traps and making the game increasingly unwinnable. And he just went along with it the whole time because I loved it. And, and it wasn't, as an adult now, I can look back on that and when he said, I hated that game, realize what he had, basically what he had done for me.
Yep.
And understand that he did it, why he did it, to make me happy. Uh-huh. And ultimately it was such a formative thing for me because it was sort of, that was sort of my first foray into really game mastering. Was modifying this game, or I guess game designing, because I was doing some light GMing for D&D Basic at that time, but he just went along with it for, and every weekend we would play for, it must have been like a year straight. Every weekend we played, we had a Hero Quest night, and he hated it. He just wanted to play his war games and beat me at every one of them.
Uh-huh. Wow.
I also learned too later, it was another one of those conversations that you have later as an adult. Do you know the game The Awful Green Things from Outer Space?
I do.
Fantastic board game. Uh-huh. And you know that the game is stacked against the crew.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, the crew is just, you're never going to win. But they are also a delight to play. So I was talking to, my dad about The Awful Green Things, because that was one we played a lot too. And I loved that game, and he liked it too.
Oh, good.
And he told me, I was so glad that you insisted on playing the crew every time, and you loved the crew, because I knew you would never win. I'm like, thanks, Dad. So, I guess that's my favorite RPG memory, or related to RPGs. All right, now your turn. You follow that.
My turn. All right, I'm going to bring the whole thing down.
This isn't going to be another story where you turn some player's beloved pet into shoes, is it?
No, but that's pretty good. That is pretty good. I mean, there are more stories like that from that same campaign, no less. But I will refrain from this time. No, my favorite gaming memory is actually also one of my saddest gaming memories.
Oh.
But also one of my happiest gaming memories. So it's a little mix of everything. Okay. I had a very good friend. His name was Andy. And those of you who have been following me around the internet, listening to me talk on it for years and years will know who Andy is. And you will already know the story because I've told it once before in an entirely different show. But I will tell it again because it is my favorite memory. Andy was a longtime friend and gaming partner and responsible for probably about half the games in my game collection right now. Playing them and wanting to play them and checking them out and that kind of stuff. FFG had just released the Star Wars RPG beginner box. And along with it, they put out the playtest documents for the full game.
Mm-hmm.
So we were playing past the end of the beginner box for the very first Edge of the Empire rule set. And as I mentioned earlier, they put out a pre-made module that sort of concluded what was in the beginner's box and whatnot. And we were playing that. And we were, it was taking a while because a couple other friends and whatnot were involved and everybody's schedules were all over the place and whatnot. And my memory is we took a long time getting to the end of that particular module.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up there, and we finally had kind of grokked the system and understood what it was doing, what it was intending to do, and how it wanted, to do those things. And anyway, through the course of play of the module, things were getting kind of desperate for the characters. It was not going very smoothly for them, and they were having a hard time surviving encounters and whatnot. We finally rocked up to the last encounter, which is the characters against the big bad, which is a Hutt, Timo the Hutt, I think it is, if I remember correctly. And the final confrontation turns into a fight, and things are going, really badly. And as I recall it, Andy rolled the dice to take a shot at Timo the Hutt, and what he ended up with was the only triumph we had seen. Triumph being like a critical, but better,
Right.
The only triumph we had seen in the entire game up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, things were pretty desperate. And I gave him, the best resolution result for that triumph, because it was just amazing. The role panned out incredibly well, and so it ended up like he shot, and then a giant chandelier over the top of the hut collapsed and crashed down on him, and wiped him out. I sold it. It was a big time victory, and Andy was the big damn hero in every sense of the word. Saved the entire group from certain death. I'm not even kidding. They were on their last legs, down to their final hit points. He saved everybody, and I just turned it into this incredible final scene of him, triumphing and all. I sold it. Okay,
right.
I absolutely sold it. It was cinematic. It was incredible and impressive, and the whole 9 yards. And that is the last game Andy ever played, because he died 2 days later.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's my favorite memory, though.
Well, sure.
So,
I'm sorry. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's sad and it's happy at the same time. He had an incredible time and an incredible game.
And you gave that to him.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that's really the great thing about role-playing games, is that at the end of the day, it is just creating these moments with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's what's great about being a GM. For all whatever work you put in and all the hard work and stuff, it's really just about those moments with your friends. Sorry, I think I have something in my eye, actually.
Yeah.
No. Wow.
Anyway, we have other feedback to deal with as well.
We do. But thank you, that was Volcronus?
Yes, Volcronus. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, thank you for that question. These are the moments where it's genuinely just fun to talk about gaming. Mm-hmm. Because we do get a little heavy sometimes.
Yeah. Let me see here. Is this our buddy Leland J. Tankersley?
Leland J. Tankersley, yes.
From the comments.
The one who has been eternally grateful for us for being able to pronounce his name.
Yes.
On a first try, no less.
From the comments to episode 62. You remember episode 62?
I do remember episode 62.
There were a lot of things in episode 62.
There were a lot of things.
I'm told that the line I'm supposed to read is, a lot of people had a lot of interesting thoughts, which we really appreciate, but this one jumped out. It's a very good insight.
Specifically, those were just my notes to you to explain why I wanted to include that in the.
No, I'm reading as
you're
written.
Just reading it. Okay.
That's right.
Because I had asked a question about how to capture the feeling of a scavenger hunt, the feeling of like video game scavenger hunting and searching and stuff.
Right.
We had a long discussion about that.
We did.
And then there was a lot of, I went through all the comments, which I don't usually do. I skim the comments. I hate to say, but there were a lot of comments on that topic and a lot of very interesting things were said. And, we don't want to go back and have the whole same discussion again with all the feedback and stuff.
Right.
But this one from Leland J. Tankersley jumped out at me because it starts with an observation that legit made me look at this a different way. It was a thought that just didn't occur to me. And I am always grateful for that, so we have to call it out now.
All righty. I will read the thought.
Thank you, sir.
What stands out is a pattern violated. In a visual medium, that's easy. One tree is taller than the others, etc. In a narrative medium, you need to be a bit more creative. Say in your dungeon, every room has a small drain at the base of a wall. Eventually, there's a room that has 2 drains. Maybe one is fake. Or no drains. Maybe it's been sealed off. Or you're in a bunk room, barracks area. Every room has some number of orcs and each has a bunk, footlocker, and so on. Footlockers are full of socks, dirty underwear, love letters written in Orcish, and so on. But one room has an extra footlocker, and it's empty. Maybe that footlocker actually conceals the mechanism for opening a locked door. Or there's a pattern to your architecture such that every room has a door in every wall. One room is missing one door. Players are going to want to examine the doorless wall, right? Be consistent in descriptions of lighting, decoration, set dressing, and so forth. Then when you violate that consistency, it will attract attention. Don't always put something rewarding in the unusual areas, though, and sometimes there should be something bad, as you point out with the example of the spider in the fireplace. I will say that yes, this is excellent. This is kind of, you remember at one point I started, every room has 5 interactables and, there's always a painting and a carpet and a desk and a, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is kind of where I was headed with that, but I couldn't quite get the thought together myself. So here. Excellent. Well done.
Yeah. And that really put it into perspective for me because the mystery wasn't about how to make people. What it really identified was the key is finding a narrative way to establish a pattern that causes attentive players to look for the thing that doesn't match the pattern.
Right.
And it's a really good way to restate the problem. I don't think it's always as easy as, every room in the dungeon has a drain, except for the one room. But the general statement of the problem is accurate, and I think that gives a much better way to solve it. So, genuinely, thank you, Leland J. Tankersley, for stating it that way. That's really apt.
He's like, he should have a third after his name. Leland J. Tankersley the third.
I think I did say that, like, because his name is like the business, like the classic businessman name.
Maybe you did say that. Get a third attached to your name, Leland.
Have a kid and name him after you, and then you can be the second. There. Because that's how that works.
Exactly. That's precisely how it works. Just name all your kids.
Well, wasn't that that was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy joke, wasn't it? Like Zaphod Beeblebrox's father was Zaphod Beeblebrox II, and then his grandfather was Zaphod Beeblebrox III, and so on. Because there had been an accident with a contraceptive and a time machine.
Right.
And that was the only explanation that was ever given.
You'll have to kind of work it out. Don't know what it means, but there it is. Excellent. We received some other comments about episode 62 as well.
Mm-hmm. I bet we did.
I'll bet we did. Kirk, for example, raises a point. He says, regarding the notion of posting everything to social media and what inspires it, I disagree that it is at all a fundamentally new thing. I think social media has largely replaced the way people used to treat their physical neighbors. The classic nuclear family, keeping up with the Joneses mentality. There are a lot of people my grandmother's age who built their garden or bought their truck so that their neighbors would be impressed. They cared inordinately about what the strangers in proximity thought about them. They would host garden parties just to indicate their income or their wife's cooking. I think younger generations have just replaced physical proximity with digital proximity. Congratulations, you win the argument.
Yep. No, you know what? That's totally fair. I think there probably is a lot to that. It's just, everybody is always concerned about status and the way their neighbors see them. The only difference is now everybody is your neighbor on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huh.
It's only us curmudgeonly hermits that never go anywhere or do anything or talk to anybody.
Yep. And obviously, if you're interested in the rest of the responses to us shouting at clouds, as it was explained by one reader,
yes,
go to the website and check it out. I don't think there's any reason to reopen the rest of the rather extended and very off-topic discussion we ended up having last time.
Yeah. Yeah, go check it out on the website. Your input is, aside from Angry, who only skims things, is actually read by at least one of us.
Some of it's really long.
I know.
And some of it is people disagreeing with me.
I know.
I don't like those things.
Gosh, it's rough.
Longness and disagreement are terrible. No, we have run out of episode.
So what do we do for 7 minutes? Oh, no, I take it back. What do we do for 6 minutes?
Well, if we keep thinking about it long enough, the problem will solve itself.
Oh, that's true.
Because that alarm is going off no matter how much we actually talk, right?
Well, funnily enough, yes. Funnily enough, guess what I forgot to do at the start of this recording?
Set the alarm? Well, I guess you could go back and set it now, but unfortunately, we're out of time. Did that work? Do I have the power?